Hi, Steve Stolberg here with pinup number 24. One of the March rewards in my Patreon subscription. This one started out as a sketch I made maybe 15 years ago or so, which I recently found and decided to finally do something with it. I'll take you through my sketches here. First the old thumbnails, which you see here. And I actually picked this one, the bottom one. And so I refined it, enlarged it, worked on it, and I also googled some reference after refining it. And so I improved the anatomy here, as you can see. This is some of the reference I used: the chair, the legs, the back leg, and I shall now start with some more adjustments. You see the red lines there are further adjustments I'm making, and I'm also moving the whole image around, warping and shifting stuff to make it more believable and anatomy. That's always the biggest challenge. Also, you can see this this second foot here is looking a bit weird. Later I changed that to a different one. I worked some more on that later. But for now I'm still warping and moving stuff around. Particularly the legs, folded up legs like this. This is a complex pose. For some reason, I'm not sure why, the arm was not a big problem in this particular pose, but yeah, the legs were really kicking my ass. Okay, so here we have the finalized sketch, and I'm now drawing a sort of rough, slightly different style. It's a different brush I'm using than I've showed you before. I'm purposely trying to be a little rough, a little rougher than I normally am. Experimenting. Of course, in the face here, I still need to keep a certain level of smoothness, like the cheek, for instance. And later you'll see wherever her skin, like the elbow, the arm, the legs, the knee, whenever those parts are being drawn, I have to still be extremely as smooth as I can, you know, because Terada Katsuya, he can get away with being rough all over the place, but I think even when he draws, he goes through the same. He has a range of roughness, like some lines will be more rough than other lines. I think I shall check that out later and have a look. You guys can do that too. You can Google his work and have a look. Yeah, as I was sketching, the thumbnail obviously wasn't supposed to be Velma from Scooby-Doo, but at one stage she turned into Velma. I'm not sure why. I think it happened because of the sweater, which at first wasn't quite as loose as this one, especially the collar around her neck. There was a bit of a collar, but it was smaller, and I kind of kept gradually enlarging the collar and making the sweater looser and softer looking, and finally I guess I just made the connection, like, oh, this looks kind of like Velma's sweater a little bit, and that's when I added the glasses and finalized that, and added these vertical lines on the lower edge of the sweater and around the neck and also around the arm cuffs. Yeah, for some strange reason I just feel like the hands and the arms in this particular image were quite easy to do. I didn't even have any reference for it. And here are those lines I talked about earlier on the leg, where I'm trying to be extra smooth and careful. But the benefit of being a bit rough everywhere else is that if you make some microscopic mistakes on the smooth parts like this, it isn't crucial. It's not a deal breaker when that happens. So yeah, that's good. It makes it a little easier. I'm also trying to not shade with the ink line. I did a little bit there on the malleolus, which is this part right here, but in general I try very hard not to do that because it doesn't look good. I've learned from my experience with my graphic novel drawing on the female form. Of course you can put a lot of that into other types of anatomy, like monsters, male, old people, you know. But when the skin's supposed to be smooth, that doesn't work very well. Now I'm experimenting with the lighting. And what I did, which went by a little too quick maybe, was I have separated into layers the background, the chair, and her skin and her sweater, and given them slightly different gray tones just to separate them visually. And what I'm doing here is I'm looking for a lighting direction, a type of lighting, and I found it. You saw the arrow that was just there. I painted that one in to really show myself and you also the lighting direction, to really be able to visualize it. And here I am just simply painting in the effects of that lighting direction, just trying to think about where does it hit, where does the light hit. And doing it this simply is good for making it easier to handle and to think about it and to figure it out before you start coloring the image. You see it's very rough at this stage. But since it's on a different layer, it's very easy to make this smoother later. I like working this way, to have the lines on a different layer. Also notice I made the lines brown. That's going to be helpful later because most everything in this image is going to be warm colors. It's going to be brown on the chair, orange sweater, the skin is going to be warm color, her hair is going to be dark brown, so I chose brown. I think brown lines is a good choice for skin, and even this kind of brown, a lighter brown. But this isn't the final color. I have two layers for the lines. I had one layer that is multiplied and it's not 100%. I pull it down to less than 100. I can't remember the exact number right now. But you experiment, and then the second layer above that is a normal layer, so that the normal layer will add back some opaque light brown on top of the, because multiply is going to give you a very dark line. You need to be able to play with both. You need to be able to fade in and out the darkness of the line, and then you also need to fade in and out the lighter orange or brown, which you can see here is not working very well right here, because the shadow is actually darker than the line. Sometimes that works, but not in this case. And so what I did later was also I erased some of the lines on either layer. Of course not the same line on both layers, but in some parts where I wanted the line to be lighter, I erased the multiply line, and in some parts like here where I needed the line to be darker, I erased the normal line. Right now I'm just airbrushing the chair, the leather chair. I'm trying to keep the highlights cooler than the rest of the chair, but I'm not succeeding very well, so I'm going to have to go back over it a few more times to try to work those highlights to become more bluish. I'm using auto contrast, and then I'm using curves to tweak the chair layer, and gradient map tool here to make the darks warmer and the highlights bluer, using color mode, fading it in and out. You guys know I do that a lot. I do that a lot with skin, and since leather has been a type of skin on some kind of animal, you can just treat it fairly similar to how you treat skin. You see, leather has to follow the similar formula. It has to be quite warm in the darks and quite cool in the lights. See here, I'm struggling with actually creating the right kind of warm, which would have been easier if I could have gotten the color right from the beginning, but this way you get to see how it can be also adjusted after the fact. And there was a little jump there, but I switched off the recorder because I was having trouble with the sofa, and I worked on it for a while without recording it. But you can see I think I finally got the highlights where I wanted them. I used the reference, of course, to do that, and I added some texture here. I made this part darker, which before it didn't really look, the light didn't look right. I increased the contrast. I made the lights lighter and the darks darker here. This is all supposed to be shadow, and these blue highlights here are just supposed to be a secondary light coming from our right. This strong light here is the main light coming from our left, that's hitting here and here. So that's what I did there. I added some detail, some extra wrinkles here around each button, and these little ones here, of course. Right now I'm working on the skin. I'm kind of roughly painting in a secondary bounce light, a cool bounce light. I'm imagining the similar one which is hitting the chair also. Later I smooth that out. You can do that in several different ways. That's fairly easy. You can select the area and use Gaussian blur a couple of times. Also good if you change the selection slightly between those couple of times. The danger with using Gaussian blur, or a heavy blur, is that you can see your selection outline. You can also use feather. You could feather your selection. That's another way to do it. This image is fairly monochrome. I guess basically it's only really two colors here that have been mixed. The blue and the orange basically mixing to brown. You could see it that way. You could probably print this, like, if you know the printing industry and the methods of printing stuff, you could probably print this with only two colors instead of four, and it would probably look okay. You might lose some subtlety, but I think like 90% of the colors would be available just from mixing orange and blue. But I just noticed that now. I didn't think about this when I was making this image. The cream on her cocoa is a little bit yellowish. I think that's the only one that might not be possible to replicate. There's also slight yellowishness here on the highlight on the sweater. sharpening up shadow edges and softening up other. Right now I'm airbrushing shadow onto her butt there. Here's where I'm sharpening the shadow edge. Just selecting it and just pulling it with a smudge tool. That's enough. No need to get fancy with that. Inverting it, pulling it from the other direction, if you want to ensure a total sharpness of an edge. Now I'm smoothing out the painting I did before. It still looks quite rough. I think it's because of the compression of the video. But after this I also used the Gaussian blur method that I talked about earlier. I'll see if I can spot when that happens. I guess it happened already. I didn't spot it when it actually happened. It still looks quite rough, as I said, here because of the compression of the video. It's been compressed twice because I recorded twice. It's been compressed twice. Yeah, that's it, done. Cleaned up, polished. Here you can see the other foot that I mentioned in the beginning. It came in quite a while ago, but I forgot to mention it. Thanks for watching. Bye.